I have slowly been chipping away at this video for months. I kind of started working on it around May of 2023, and as games ended up releasing or as my opinions shifted about certain games, I ended up adding the footage and updating it accordingly. So throughout the video, you might see my facial hair change, you might see my shirt change and stuff like that. Don't be too alarmed. Just remember that a lot of these clips were recorded months apart from one another. The crazy thing is, 2023 was one of the most solid years for gaming that we've had for a very long time. Like last year, we obviously had some great games, but there was barely enough for a top 10 list. Before we get started with the actual big boy list, I wanted to talk about the most disappointing games this year, as well as games that didn't make it onto my list that you might end up questioning. So first, the garbage, Lies of P. I tried the demo of this. I was actually pretty hyped for it, but when I ended up playing it, I didn't like it. Lies of P is one of those games similar to Sekiro, where it's got a huge emphasis on parrying rather than dodging. And for whatever reason, parrying just never really clicked with me. And so it's no surprise I didn't like Lies of P. Wulong also ended up coming out, which it kept my interest for a little bit longer than the Lies of P demo did, but honestly, I did end up getting bored with the similar mechanics to Neo. Lords of the Fallen 2 also ended up coming out, and honestly, this game sucks. I don't feel the passion behind this project. I feel like the developers are just copying what's successful so that they can make money, which aligns perfectly with what happened with Lords of the Fallen 1, because that game literally just ripped off everything about Dark Souls without fully understanding why Dark Souls. Now, there was actually a Souls-like game that came out this year that I did enjoy, which was Remnant 2. This game was a blast, but a lot of the game owed its identity to the first one. And I know that that's kind of a stupid thing to say because obviously it's a sequel. They're going to end up doing a lot of the same things. But when you make a comparison of Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, these are all sequels in a franchise that change up the formula almost completely from one another. Remnant 2 for me was just more Remnant, which isn't a bad thing, but it wasn't good enough to make it onto my big boy list this year. The thing is, despite having all of these games, I almost feel like there was something more recently that just absolutely obliterated all of these, but I can't quite put my finger on it. Dead Island 2 came out, and I don't know why. I'm seeing some people say, oh, Dead Island 2 belongs on the Game of the Year. It's like, what the hell's wrong with these people, dude? Did they even play this game? Dead Island 2 sucked, man. It was a janky mess of a video game. I did end up doing a playthrough of it on the channel, and I did enjoy my time with it because I played it with a buddy, but both of us very, very openly criticized the game for what it ended up doing wrong. And while it was a nice little romp through LA with a bunch of zombies, it was just a bad game. Again, in comparison to last year's Dying Light 2 that nobody seemed to talk about, and I don't know why, because that game was amazing. Now, as bad as Dead Island 2 was, check this out. Ugh. Yeah, Redfall came out this year. Did you forget? I did. Oh, we also tried the Resident Evil 8 VR with the PS VR 2 that I refunded as soon as I was done with that playthrough, but oh my God. Capcom does great VR ports. Like, I'm so surprised with how well it ended up playing. And in a lot of ways, I would be excited for the RE4 remake in VR, except that I'm not interested in the PSVR 2, which I already have another video reviewing that. Speaking of the RE4 remake, I didn't really like it, and it's not making it onto my Game of the Year list, which is so strange because I love Resident Evil as a franchise. Like, I don't know, man, maybe I'm the only one who felt this way, but I felt that the RE4 remake was weak in comparison to like the RE2 remake, for example. That game was a substantial leap from the original game that was a fossil into the modern version. The Resident Evil 4 remake was kind of just Resident Evil 4, but the gameplay was slower and it had fancier graphics. Moving on, Sons of the Forest was another game that I think deserves to be mentioned in this video just because it was a very surprisingly good time for me. I think the reason why I enjoyed it so much is because it was just such a casual romp where I just started streaming it. Lots of you ended up tuning into it coincidentally, and it made it a lot more fun just kind of playing through this game together with you guys, you know? Even though the game is broken and doesn't really have any content whatsoever right now and does not deserve the amount of positive reception it's gotten from people. But I mean, hey, it was still a good time. You know what wasn't a good time? Minecraft Legends. I was waiting for that game for so long, dude, and it came out and it was terrible. It was so bad. Like the gameplay loop immediately wore out its welcome because you would just go and destroy a camp, and once you've done the first camp, you've literally beaten the entire game because it's just gonna do the same thing throughout the entire experience. Oh, and it also might come as a surprise, but Diablo 4 isn't making it onto my Game of the Year list either. Like, Diablo 4 is an incredible game if it's your first Diablo game, but for myself and other Diablo veterans, Diablo 4 was a bit weak. As a comparison, the jump between Diablo 1 and 2 and even 3 was huge and substantial and completely changed the entire way that the game was going to end up being played and approached. Diablo 4 just feels like Diablo 3 with a new coat of paint, and it just doesn't really have an identity to call its own. Unfortunately, Blizzard has made a comment about it and said that it's not going to take them nearly as long to release Diablo 5, which means that more than likely Diablo 4 was just them testing the waters to make the IP relevant again, and rather than resolve all of the fundamental problems with this game, they're just gonna move on to making Diablo 5. God help us all. So another one that might be a bit of a surprise to you guys is Wayfinder. I was really excited about Wayfinder when it first got announced. And even though I still really enjoy the game, it had one of the worst launches I have ever seen in my lifetime. Like, this is inexcusable. And no matter how much I still want to play the game, it refuses to be played because it's just still so buggy months into its early access release. I mean, I keep playing it and I'm still hopeful that it's gonna end up coming to its full potential one day, but my God. Another thing that I think is worth mentioning is the fact that I got to play Assassin's Creed Mirage this year. Like, I'll be real with you guys, I wasn't planning on playing it and the game itself wasn't anything spectacular, but the fact that Ubisoft sent me a key to this game was something I really appreciated. On top of that, they sent me a key to Assassin's Creed VR afterwards. My only hope is that when Assassin's Creed Japan comes out, I'm still considered for keys in their creator program. Now, it wouldn't be a Game of the Year video without us at least acknowledging Baldur's Gate 3, because this game is more than likely going to sweep the Game Awards and be on a lot of people's Game of the Year list. People out here are praising the fact that the developers are giving a full, complete product when you buy it. Every single Japanese company is sitting there like, hold my beer. Like, respect where respect is due. These developers basically took the ungodly task of making D&D into a digital game. But I would still categorize this game as a board game. Just now I can play it on my computer. Like, this is just one of those weird games that for whatever reason ended up capturing the casual audience of people that aren't normally gamers. Why else would a weirdo turn-based sex RPG end up getting player numbers almost as close as Elden? Oh, because everyone's a pervert. Putting all the jokes aside, guys, I did put in a decent amount of playtime with Baldur's Gate. The sheer amount of randomness and choices that are presented to the player is staggering. But the main reason it's not getting on my list? It's boring. So speaking of games that have way too much hype, Starfield came out and it's exactly what I thought it was. Skyrim in space with guns, or Fallout, but space themed instead of post-apocalyptic theme. Bethesda saying that they've been working on Starfield for 25 years is like an IQ test, because you know that if somebody falls for it, they're an idiot. Like, what did they talk about the game 25 years ago? They wrote down, hey, we want to do a space RPG, and then Todd's just spinning it towards the media like, yeah, we've been working on it for 25 years. Don't read too deep into it. Again, I'm not trying to spread unwarranted hate towards this game because I actually really enjoyed it, but it is nothing new. The reason I enjoy this game is the same reason I enjoy Skyrim. But we still had something awesome come with Starfield finally being released. Now that the game is done, they can start working on the next Elder Scrolls. Oh, and I almost completely forgot about Dredge. This game isn't gonna make it onto my big boy list, but it's definitely worth mentioning, and I can easily recommend it. It's a fishing simulator with resource management and a whole bunch of evil Cthulhu monsters that come out at night to eat your soul. Oh, and I guess we should talk about Alan Wake 2, because for whatever reason, it's been nominated for so many different awards. I don't know why. This game is not worth talking about. It's trash. This is an actual screenshot of Alan Wake 2 that I took. And you wanna know why it's all polygons? Because I didn't install it on my SSD. Truth be told, I did start recording Alan Wake 2 as a series, but the PC port was just so ungodly bad and unoptimized, and the main game itself and story was so boring that I scrapped all of it and canceled the series before it even began on the channel. This game does not deserve to be on any Game of the Year list, let alone the official Game Awards, where it took way too many categories that other games deserved more. Oh, I guess it's time now. Okay. Why is the text slightly off? Star Wars Jedi Survivor. This game expanded upon all the shortcomings of Fallen Order. My only problem is that it still feels weird to have Souls-like combat in a game with lightsabers where you're supposed to feel like a powerful Jedi fighting powerful opponents. This does not feel like my character is powerful. It feels like I'm hitting enemies with a fake lightsaber toy from Disney. Please give me a remake of Jedi Academy and Jedi Outcast. They were far better than these games. But you know what? At least EA no longer has an exclusivity license with Star Wars, so we're gonna start to see better Star Wars games like Star Wars Outlaws coming out from other companies. Sonic Superstars on PC. It's kind of surprising to me that this game only has local co-op on consoles, which thankfully if you end up getting this game on PC, you can just use remote play to play with your friends online. But at the same time, let's be real, the co-op sucked in this game, so that's probably why they didn't bother making it online.
Oh, that's horrible.
What?
Why did it follow me? Follow me into here.
Why did it follow you into the game over screen, bro? The single player is great though. I didn't grow up with the OG Sonic games. I didn't really like them. With Sonic Superstars, I bought it for the multiplayer. The multiplayer was god awful, so I refunded the game, but then I bought it again later because the more I sat with it, the more I just wanted to play. You know what? F it. Final Fantasy 16. I was very outspoken with my distaste for this game, but despite my issues with it, it still has boss fights better than God of War. There, I said it. But the real star of the show is the soundtrack. This is just banger after banger. I don't think I've ever played a game that has this many songs that I enjoyed. Like, the main battle music is already stupendous, but the fact that they ended up going the extra mile of making the music sync up with the cutscenes was like watching a movie. The story was also great, but it is unfortunate that the game has so many mandatory side quests and pointless dialogue that hold it back. Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2 didn't really do anything too different from previous titles, but it didn't really need to. However, one huge criticism that I would say towards these Spider-Man games is that they haven't changed since the original Spider-Man 2 on PS2. You're still swinging around the city, you're still fighting spongy enemies, you still have side quests that suck. On one hand, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the swinging mechanics and combat are just so innately fun that this game definitely deserves to be recognized and on my Game of the Year list. But I will acknowledge that this game feels dated. Even the coolest mechanic of this game, which is the fact that you can play as Venom, is not new. The Amazing Spider-Man, which was a cel-shaded, much older Spider-Man game, allowed you to play as both Peter Parker and Venom. Like, at least give me a new environment or make the game co-op or online or something. Do anything to make this game feel like something new and fresh instead of another Spider-Man game with a new paint job. Well, now that I got that out of my system, Hammerwatch 2. Yep, that's right. This game beat Spider-Man for me. Here's the thing. Even though I talked about how Diablo 4 didn't make it onto my list, I still had an insane amount of hype for Diablo 4. Hammerwatch 2 may be an indie game with a handful of developers, but this game delivered in spades what I wanted from Diablo 4. So what do I mean by this? Well, for starters, this game is genuinely challenging and doesn't rely on being constantly stun locked like in Diablo 4. But on top of that, the map being open world just makes a lot more sense in Hammerwatch because a lot of the caves are interconnected with one another. Diablo 4 kind of feels like you've got this big expansive map, map, but then you're still just going into a one-off dungeon and then warping out. It didn't really do much to make the world feel jointed. But I also think that the classes, oddly enough, are more impressive in Hammerwatch. The only downside to Hammerwatch 2 is it's not particularly popular right now, which means it could be a while before we start seeing some banger custom maps and mods. No!
Why'd you kill the cat?
Hogwarts Legacy. Hogwarts Legacy was good. The main story was great, and the amount of detail and care that they put into the world was impressive, even for someone who isn't a Harry Potter fan. This guy. But let's not forget that outside of the main story content, which will take you around 20 hours, the open world exploration was worse than Skyrim. Like, it was actually garbage. Still, Hoggy Woggy is just one of those games that's really Poggy Woggy. I originally had no interest in Hogwarts Legacy. It was only because you guys kept asking, are you gonna play it? Are you gonna play it? Are you gonna play it? That I ended up picking it up, and I ended up enjoying it thoroughly. And it kind of started a bit of a trend with me where I started playing games that I wasn't sure I was going to enjoy. I was taking more risks throughout this year and ended up finding some other bangers that I just loved. Like, it's a damn shame that this game didn't get recognized at the official Game Awards. I understand that it's probably got to do with all the J.K. Rowling politics BS, but this game was awesome. Lethal Company. I'm gonna be real with you guys, I wasn't even considering this game to be on my big boy list this year. However, what really threw this over the top for me and made me include it on my list and rank it so highly was mods. That just shot this game's fun level up to the stratosphere. See, Lethal Company is this year's Phasmophobia. This is gonna be one of those games that I know I'm gonna play off and on with my buddies for many, many years, which is more than I can say for a lot of the games that are on this list where they're one and dones. You'll beat them and move on. That said, I do want to reiterate that I am ranking this game strictly based on having a full party of people, because when I'm playing this game solo, it's kind of boring. Plot twist. Starfield. Is this game overhyped? Yes. Is it just another Bethesda game? Yes. But since when is that a bad thing? Honestly, I went into Starfield with very, very low expectations. The early portion of the game sucked. The UI is still terrible. And there's some other stuff I can complain about, like planets being empty, but oh wait, that was on purpose, right? The thing is, you guys have probably already heard people saying Starfield gets good after the 12-hour mark. And while that is one of the stupidest notions ever, like, ah, yes, the game gets good after a set amount of time. That's called Stockholm Syndrome. I'd consider Starfield to be Bethesda's greatest hits album. It doesn't do anything new, but it does focus on all of their strengths. And despite my issues with it, I still had a blast. My main critique isn't even a critique really, it's just that I'm personally not a big fan of the whole space astronaut thing, but you better believe that I'm excited as hell for the next Elder Scrolls. The Dead Space remake. God damn, this game goes hard. Like, there's something about that Xbox 360 era of video game that modern games just don't really have. Dead Space was the full package right from the start. It included everything from the original game and is somehow still up to par with modern games, especially when you compare it to Callisto Protocol, which added New Game Plus in a later patch for no reason. This game is so good that I streamed it for 10 hours and beat it in one sitting. It wasn't because I was trying to rush through the game or anything. I was just having that much fun. Now, I know it might seem a bit strange for me to have the Dead Space remake on my Game of the Year list, but not Resident Evil 4. But I'm gonna be real with you guys. Dead Space is better. Vertigo 2. I don't think a Game of the Year video would be complete for me if I didn't have at least one VR title that stood out to me as something worth noting. Like, while Resident Evil Village is an incredible game and the VR port is also incredible, Vertigo 2 is a fully dedicated exclusive VR game. You can't play this game without VR headset. There is something to be said about a lot of VR games. Putting a game into VR immediately makes it one of the most immersive experiences you've ever had. And so oftentimes a lot of the VR games that I play are usually really crappy games, and the only gimmick they've got going for them that makes them fun is the fact that they're in VR. Take away VR and they don't really have any identity beyond that. But Vertigo 2 2 is one of those rare games like Half-Life Alyx, where even if you took away VR and had mouse and keyboard controls, it would still be incredible. From the amazing weapons, to the bosses, to the secrets, and even the story kind of crept up on me and ended up being really, really interesting. The Metroid Prime Remake. Let's all just take a moment of silence to appreciate Nintendo for shadow dropping this game in the middle of the year. Like, we just had a Nintendo Direct that suddenly was like, hey, yeah, we've been working on a Metroid Prime remake and it releases today. It was just like one of the coolest moments in this year. The game also still holds up extremely well considering how old it is. And for a remake, this game is beautiful and runs at 60 frames on the Switch. Like, it gets me really excited for Metroid Prime 4, even though they're probably going to release that on the next Nintendo console. I think the other reason I just had so much fun with the Metroid Prime remake was most of all because I did it during live streams with you guys helping me out in chat, because my God, I would have gotten lost without you. Assassin's Creed Nexus VR. These game titles are getting so long, dude. So this is another one of those games that I'm so glad Ubisoft threw a code to me. Because while it was on my radar, I wasn't really expecting it to be a fully fleshed out VR Assassin's Creed game. At the beginning of the game, you're kind of just playing through the tutorial for many hours, but as the training wheels slowly came off and the world started to open up, I was very impressed at the scope of this game. The map started to become a lot larger and also left more room for interpretation of how you would approach the missions. While on the channel, I just did a strict playthrough focusing on the main quest. This is one of those games that I guarantee I am going to spend a lot of time off camera just playing myself. Bang on Balls Chronicles. No, this isn't a joke about your mom. This little indie platforming game completely surprised me. It just randomly showed up on my Steam recommended, and I'm so glad that it did, because this is a banger of a platformer. While it's in Unreal Engine, so obviously it looks spectacular, the thing that I appreciate about this game is it doesn't look like it's in Unreal Engine, if that makes sense. Like, it's a very stylized world. What was so impressive to me is that you essentially have 4 big open world maps that are more fleshed out than a game like Spider-Man. The entire game is basically just a collectathon, but there's just so many things to see that I couldn't stop playing this one. I'm really excited to see anything else that these devs put out, but I would love it if we got some DLC. I would buy that immediately. Armored Core 6. So like I said earlier in the video, I've been taking a lot more risks this year with games that are kind of outside of my wheelhouse. Armored Core 6 was one of those games that I was very unsure whether or not I would enjoy it or regret my purchase. I bought it strictly because it was a FromSoft game. I'm a fan of the company and the games that they make, and while I have a limited experience with the previous Armored Core games, what I was hoping from AC6 was that it would be a more streamlined version of those older titles, which it did deliver on. And oh my God, I love this game. Like, not only was the gameplay quick, fun, and addicting, the music was god tier. And maybe about 3/4 of the way through the game, you start getting presented with choices that give you multiple endings, give you different boss fights and different mech parts and stuff. And replaying the game again on New Game Plus will actually give you even more choices, more mech parts, more bosses. So while I don't have any interest in playing any of the previous titles in the series, I will buy Armored Core 7. System Shock Remake? What the fuck? Let me preface by saying that the company that remade System Shock, Night Dive Studios, is responsible for bringing Turok 2 to PC. Turok 2 is the reason I started my YouTube channel, because I wanted an excuse to play through one of my favorite games as a kid. So while I was a fan of the studio themselves, I wasn't necessarily a fan of System Shock. Granted, I never played the original, because this was more like using Google Spreadsheet than playing a video game. But my God, I am a fan now. Like, Night Dive Studios has never looked better to me. The thing is, System Shock Remake is not one of the games that I played on the channel. I actually just played it off and on myself, off camera. And the only video that I have on the channel about it was my review, which was just ranting and raving about how amazing it was. I don't know why I was so on the fence about whether or not I would end up getting System Shock, or more so whether or not I would end up enjoying it. Especially considering that I actually really enjoyed Deus Ex. That was actually one of my favorite original Xbox games, so it's no surprise that I loved System Shock and played through it multiple times already. We're finally at the runner-up. And I gotta tell you, these last 2 games were neck and neck.
Onward and upward.
Super Mario Wonder. It's no wonder why this game's so high on my list. It's a 2D Mario game. It's a masterpiece. Do I even need to say anything more about it? No, I don't. This Mario game to me had its Breath of the Wild moment, because what I appreciate about Nintendo is they're taking these old, tired concepts and injecting them with new life. It's been a long time since we had a 2D Mario game, and I'm glad that it was such a long time, because the new Super Mario Bros. Games were cool, but they were kind of all copy and paste from one another, whereas Mario Wonder manages to be unique. What I appreciate at the utmost is the fact that you can just see random players online. It really brings new life into this game. The fact that I was able to play it alongside so many of you guys during streams and stuff really meant a lot to me. And what can I say? At the end of the day, I'm still a Nintendo fan and I'm still a Mario fan. Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, the sequel to Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild was one of the best open world single player games of all time and still ends up holding that trophy in comparison to a lot of other games. But Tears of the Kingdom tops it because it manages to take everything that was good about Breath of the Wild and make it better. I definitely have my complaints, you know, there's issues with the UI being a little too dated and some quality of life stuff that they could have changed, but I completely disagree with people that are saying Tears of the Kingdom is nothing more than Breath of the Wild DLC. Because if DLC was always this good, Ubisoft would be my favorite company. Like, only Nintendo could start working on Breath of the Wild DLC, then come up with so many unique ideas that they turn it into a full fleshed out game. And that's my Game of the Year list. You can sound off in the comments if you guys disagree with me, but more importantly, I would like to hear what are your favorite games of the year, because I'm sure that your list is going to be very, very different from mine. You know you're forgetting something, right? Wait, what? Yeah, you still got like one more game. Wait, what do you mean? Like, I wrote this script. What's better than Zelda? This one might confuse a lot of you, especially it being above everything else out of this whole year, but Mario RPG has a lot more personal value to me because this was my favorite Super Nintendo game that has a lot of memories tied to it. As you've probably already seen with my reaction to the reveal of this game, I did not think that this would ever happen. Due to licensing issues between Square Enix and Nintendo and whatever else, I just didn't think that this was possible. I would have already been satisfied with having Mario RPG ported onto the Switch store, but the fact that we got a remake from the ground up that had a whole slew of new post-game content was just a dream come true for me. There were so many things about this game that I just loved, and I gotta say that the entire game from front to back was just an absolute joy to play. Maybe I'm biased, but I don't care. It's my Game of the Year list, and Mario RPG wins for me. But wait, there's more. Did you guys know that Stray ended up releasing on Xbox this year? That means Stray qualifies as being a game released in 2023. It is back on the menu, boys. Game of the Year goes to Stray. Woo! $40 game with 4 hours of gameplay. Over 100,000 reviews on Steam. Well, like, seriously, this game is just so creative. It's the game that keeps on giving. Like, God, I wish I knew how to create video games, because then all I would have to do is make a walking simulator and make a cute cat the mascot. Instant success, millions of dollars. Oh man, out here busting my ass. When all I had to do was make a game about a cat.